Hello and welcome to my Photopea or Photopea as I like to call it. It's always a little bit confusing what to call this particular program. If anyone knows, please let me know. So Photopea, as I'm going to call it, is basically an online Photoshop clone. It's browser based. It will run on pretty much any browser, any kind of computer. Obviously, the processing power and internet connection will affect the speed that this thing runs, but it's actually a very impressive little browser-based clone of Photoshop. Has a lot of the same functionality. It's not quite as sleek, but it's a free program, so I'm pretty impressed with what I've been able to do with it so far. Now, in this first little Photopea tutorial, I'm going to work through the basics of doing a levels adjustment on a black and white image or a monochrome image. If you've looked at the Photoshop tutorial I also have done, we're going to use the exact same photo, and I'm just going to run through how Photopea does this, the little differences and little quirks you got to keep an eye out for. So we're going to open up the file from our computer. You just click on either Open from Computer right here, or just like in Photoshop, you can go File, Open, and then navigate to where you have that photo saved. So there we go. Lighting Lab, and I believe it was this photo right here. Okay, and click Open. And here we go, the photo is open. Notice a couple things right away. This is a recent change, and I'm not quite sure what the reasoning behind it is, but for some reason when you open up a Photoshop doc or even just a JPEG, it does create in your layers palette here two basically duplicate layers. I'm not sure what's up with that. It turns them off. I'm going to just delete them for now, so I'm going to select them both. If you hold down Shift while clicking on them, then you can just select them both. I'm going to hit the little delete garbage can button there. One of the things you notice is the icons are just a little bit more basic than in Photoshop, not quite as sleek. Okay. Using my Move tool, you notice that in Photopea, transform controls on your Move tool are set automatically, and that it doesn't auto-lock the main background image. So I'm just going to Command Z or Control Z to undo that. And click off of it. I do like to always lock my main background layer, so I'm just going to hit the little lock there above the layer in the layers palette, because I don't want to be touching that layer in any way. So same as in Photoshop, you can right click, you can hit duplicate layer, and in this case it doesn't give you the pop-up where you name the new layer, it just creates a copy, and then you can double click on the text and put in your new name for that layer. I like to call mine working because it's the layer that I will be doing my work upon, as opposed to the main or background layer where I don't want to touch that. Okay. So we're doing a little levels adjustment just to clean up some of the exposure, get a little bit more contrast out of this photo. So just like in Photoshop, that can be found under Image, Adjustments, and Levels, exact same hotkey. You'll notice that almost all, if not all of the hotkeys are the same between Photopea and Photoshop, which is really nice, as are almost all the sort of navigation in your palette or canvas commands when it comes to scrolling, scrubbing, zooming, and zooming out. So let's click on Levels, and we'll get this little Levels pop-up, and you will see here that we have a little histogram. In the histogram, they don't, it looks a little smoothed out compared to Photoshop. Photoshop looks a little bit more jagged. I don't know if it's just a resolution thing or just the way they choose to display it. But remember that the histogram, in a black and white image, this one's only looking at your black and white or your gray values in your image. Here's your black point, here's your 50% gray point, and here's your white point. This is basically a 256 line bar graph that tells you how many pixels, the number of pixels in every single shade of gray, all 256 of them. So you can see we have in this image, it's very underexposed dark. We've got a lot of pixels kind of below that 50% gray, especially towards that black point. Now we can move these three boxes around. In Photoshop, they do little triangles. the boxes don't, from a UX sort of or a user perspective, don't scream to me I can be clicked on and moved, but they can be. So let's bring this white point in just to brighten things up a little bit in those highlight areas. And I'm going to bring that gray point in just a little bit, and I'm also going to bring my black point in just to keep that contrast nice and high. Just creating a little bit of a higher contrast image. I don't really want to overexpose the face because I like the contrast in the image, especially between the light and dark tones and here on the checkers on the shirt. And I want to kind of maintain that as much as possible without losing too much detail. So I'm going to click once I'm happy, and you can play around with this, right? Every image is going to be kind of to your own preferences and what you're kind of trying to go with as far as how you want the image to look in the end. But I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to click OK. You'll notice here in your layers palette, quick way to check how the edit basically affected the previous or the original is simply to turn off the visibility of the working layer so that you can see through down to the main layer by clicking this little eye. So there's the original, and we just basically lightened it up, boosted that contrast a little bit, and brought out some detail there. It looks much nicer. That is the basics of a levels adjustment. Now, I did the image adjustment levels directly to my working layer. Generally speaking, if I was going to be going at this a little bit more in depth or professionally, I'd be working on a true adjustment layer as opposed to on the actual pixels of the working layer here. So I'd have created an adjustment layer using this tool right here, but this is just an introduction to the levels tool, and so I'm just working directly on my working layer. No big deal if I screw it up. I can always create another duplicate from the main. And that is the levels adjustment. Now the last thing that's important once you're done your levels adjustment is the saving process. Now when you do file save as PSD, that's basically just going to automatically download your Photopea file into your either your downloads folder, or if you're running on a Chromebook, into your Google Drive main folder. Couple problems with that. One is your file name is just whatever your file name currently is. In Photopea, how you change your file name is you actually just double click on it, and we'll get this little pop-up. Then I'm going to type in last name underscore first name. Obviously when you're doing this and you have your own sort of file organization, you're going to have your own sort of protocols here, underscore, and this is station 2 from the lighting lab that I just ran. I'm going to click OK. So last name underscore first name. Now I can either save it as a PSD if it's important that you have all the layers in the original, but if this is just to be turned in or submitted or printed, you're going to go down to export as JPEG. You're going to go down, click on JPEG, save that thing as full quality, save it, and you'll notice here that it has downloaded directly into my downloads folder. Now I'm going to pardon my messy desktop here, and we're going to close this down. And we are going to just move this over to our Google Drive. So open up our Google Drive, go to My Drive, navigate to your photography folder. There's your lighting lab, and I'll just go to my downloads folder, and we see here there's the image. So I'm just going to click and drag it into there. I'm going to replace the old version and upload it there into my Google Drive so that I have access to it. Remember that if you are, depending on what you're working on, especially if you're working on a Mac or a PC as opposed to a Chromebook, which automatically saves downloads into your Google Drive, you always do want to complete the step where you move this directly into your actual Google Drive or Google Drive Stream folder. Okay, that's it for doing a levels adjustment and saving it in the correct folder.